Hello, my dear students, and welcome to Sri Jendra Rank Zone classes. I am your science facilitator, Amit Ajmani, and in this class, we'll be starting up a new chapter that is chemical reactions and equations. First of all, let us try to relate what exactly are chemical reactions. Chemical reactions are the processes in which new substances with new properties are formed, and this happens by breaking off old chemical bonds between the atoms of the reacting substances and the making of new chemical bonds between the rearranged atoms of new substances. We know that whenever a reaction is taking place, the substances which take part in a chemical reaction are called the reactants, and the new substances which are produced as a result of chemical reactions, they are called products. So reactants will react together to form new substances called products, and this process is known as a chemical reaction, and it involves the breaking up of old bonds between the reactants and formation of new bonds between the products. Whenever we are talking about a chemical reaction, there are a certain characteristics of chemical reactions which tell us that a chemical reaction has occurred. For example, if evolution of gas is taking place, the gas is getting evolved, there must be some chemical reaction taking place as a result of which this gas is getting evolved. If there is any formation of precipitate, now what exactly is precipitate? A precipitate is a solid insoluble product which separates out from the solution during a chemical reaction. There are certain examples of precipitates that we need to remember. Lead iodide, the formula is PbI2. These are yellow colored precipitates. We need to remember the color of these precipitates. Barium sulfate, BaSO4, it is a white colored precipitate. Similarly, aluminium hydroxide, AlOH whole thrice, that is also white colored precipitate. So in any reaction, if a precipitate is getting formed, that means some chemical reaction is taking place. Fine. If there is a change in color taking place, then also it is only possible when some chemical reaction is taking place. Change in temperature is also due to some chemical reaction. Change in state also involves some chemical reaction. So these are a few characteristics of a chemical reaction. A gas is getting evolved, or a precipitate is getting formed, or there is any change in the color or temperature or the state of the reactants or of any substance. It simply means that there must be some chemical reaction taking place, because without these it is not possible for these characteristics to occur. Now, what are chemical equations? Chemical equations are the method of representing a chemical reaction. And how do we do it? How do we represent a chemical reaction? With the help of symbols, with the help of formulae of the substances involved in it. So this method of presentation is called a chemical equation. For example, if I say that water and carbon dioxide form carbonic acid, so this is the verbal representation of the reaction. But when I write the same with the help of the symbols and the formulae, for example, water I am using H2O, for carbon dioxide I am using CO2, and they form carbonic acid, that is H2CO3. So the reaction taking place now getting represented in the symbol and formula form. This is a chemical equation of the reaction taking place between water and carbon dioxide. This arrow shows the direction of the reaction. On the left hand side of the arrow, we have got the reactants. On the right hand side of the arrow, we get the products. If this reaction is taking place in any different condition, then in that case, that condition is mentioned on the arrow, like we put a delta. Delta represents heat, or we put EC, electric current, or we put any particular symbol of an element like Ni, nickel. Nickel means it is actually acting as a catalyst for this particular reaction. Okay, so this is what a chemical equation is, and a chemical equation is very informative because it tells us about the reactants, it tells us about the product, it tells us about the direction of reaction, it tells us about the condition of reaction, it tells us about which elements and how many atoms of elements are reacting together to form which compounds and how many atoms are there in that compound. So, as a whole, chemical equations are quite informative. Now we will be talking about a very important thing, that is the types of chemical equations. The chemical equations and reactions are of so many types. We will be studying them one by one. First type of chemical equation is a balanced chemical equation. Now, balance means there is a balance. Balance between what? Between the reactants and the products. So, a balanced chemical equation is that equation which has an equal number of atoms of different elements in the reactant side as well as the product side. That reaction is called a balanced chemical equation. Another is an unbalanced chemical equation. Unbalanced means that it has got unequal number of atoms of one or more elements in the reactants and products. For example, H2 hydrogen reacts with O2 oxygen to form H2O water. Now we can see that in reactant there are two atoms of hydrogen, right, and two atoms of oxygen which are combining together to form water. But in water we can see two atoms of hydrogen but only one atom of oxygen. So here the number of oxygen atoms in the reactant side is 2, but in the product side it is only 1. So it is an unbalanced chemical equation, and very importantly they are also called skeletal equations. Mostly this is the skeletal equations word that is being mentioned rather than unbalanced, right? Now, these chemical equations can be made informative in three ways. Number one, by indicating the physical state of the reactants and products, by indicating the heat changes taking place in the reaction, and by indicating the condition under which the reaction is taking place. And this condition is mentioned on the arrow, as I have already told you. Correct? Now, whenever we write a chemical equation, we always balance the chemical equation. We do not write these unbalanced or skeletal equations. We will put 2 here and 2 here to make it balance. Now, it is 4 hydrogen atoms in the reactant side and 4 hydrogen atoms in the product side, 2 oxygen atoms in the reactant side and 2 oxygen atoms in the product side. This process in which we have made the atoms, the number of atoms of each element equal on both the sides of an equation, this process is called balancing of an equation. Now we required to do this balancing because there is a reason for it. Now, what is the reason? The reason is the law of conservation of mass. This law of conservation of mass states that matter, mass, can neither be created nor destroyed in a chemical reaction. What does it mean? It means that the total mass of all the reactants must be equal to the total mass of the products. And if we leave a chemical equation unbalanced, then, for example, in the same above example, then where has that one oxygen atom gone? In the reactants, it were two oxygen atom, and in the product, it was one. So where is that one more oxygen atom that was there in the reactant? It cannot be destroyed, right? So that is why the chemical reactions and equations are balanced to satisfy the law of conservation of mass in the chemical reactions. Fine. Now the next type of chemical reactions are the exothermic reactions. What are these reactions? Exo means out, therm means heat. So the reaction in which heat or energy is liberated or it is produced are called the exothermic reactions. All the combustion reactions are exothermic reactions. Combustion reactions means burning. If we are burning any particular substance, any particular fuel, it will be associated with liberation of heat or energy. Thus, it is called exothermic reaction. Quite importantly, the process of respiration is also an exothermic process because in this process also energy is produced in the form of ATPs, adenosine triphosphate. We know that. Fine. So we need to remember that all combustion reactions and this respiration reaction is an exothermic reaction. Next type of reactions are opposite of exo, that is endothermic. Endo means absorbed in. Therm is heat. So the reactions in which heat or energy is absorbed, they are known as endothermic reactions. All the decomposition reactions. Decomposition means you are breaking up something. So they require energy for getting broken up. And this energy can be in the form of heat or light or electricity. So in other words, all the decomposition reactions are endothermic reactions. Photosynthesis. This is also an endothermic reaction. Why? Because in this reaction, energy is absorbed. And in which form? It is absorbed in the form of sunlight. So plants consume sunlight, the solar energy, for the formation of glucose from the carbon dioxide and water. We know what exactly photosynthesis is. So these are endothermic reactions. Fine. The next type of reactions that we need to know are the combination reactions. As the name suggests, these are the reactions in which two or more substances combine to form a single product. A single substance is getting formed. These are called combination reactions. For example, on reacting magnesium and oxygen, magnesium oxide is formed. Carbon monoxide and oxygen combine together to form carbon dioxide. Sulfur dioxide and oxygen combine together to form sulfur trioxide. All these are combination reactions because in reactant sides we have two or more than two substances, but the product is only one. So this is the main characteristic of combination reactions, that in reactant side we'll have two or more reactants, but in product side we will have a single product. This is combination reaction. And just the opposite of combination reactions are the decomposition reactions. They are very important. What are decomposition reactions? The reactions in which a compound splits up into two or more simpler substances. They are known as decomposition reactions. We are breaking down a particular reactant, right? And for breaking, we need to provide energy, and that energy is provided by applying heat or light or electricity. Now, if we are carrying out the decomposition reaction by applying heat, so that is known as thermal decomposition. It is also called thermolysis. By lysis, we mean to say break up. Thermo is heat, so breaking up, applying heat. For example, when calcium carbonate is heated, then in that case it breaks up to form calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So we have heated calcium carbonate. Two important things: reactant is one and the products are two or more than two. So this is a decomposition reaction. Secondly, it is done by giving heat. So it is an example of thermal decomposition. Quite important examples. These you need to learn. They are very, very important. Let us try to relate. What examples are these? Ferrous sulfate, this FeSO4. This is of green color. You need to remember the color also. When we heat ferrous sulfate, it breaks down to form Fe2O3, which is ferric oxide, SO2, this is sulfur dioxide, and SO3, which is sulfur trioxide. So here one single reactant breaks up to form three products. Now this ferric oxide is of brown color. We need to remember the color. Very important, the sulfur dioxide which is produced in this reaction, it is a choking gas, suffocating gas. So you need to remember the characteristics of these reactions, because many a times we are asked that a green colored compound X, when heated, gives a brown colored compound Y along with a choking gas Z. What are X, Y, Z? So we need to remember the important characteristics, that ferrous sulfate is green colored. So it will be X. When it decomposes, it forms brown colored ferric oxide and a choking gas, suffocating gas, sulfur dioxide. Correct? So this is quite important reaction. Another very important reaction is the heating of lead nitrate, PbNO3 whole twice. It is a colorless compound. When it is heated, it decomposes into PbO, lead monoxide, NO2, nitrogen dioxide, and O2, this is oxygen. So once again, one reactant is decomposed into three products. Very important thing to relate here is this nitrogen dioxide is liberated in the form of brown fumes. So this is very important, and this is what exactly is indirectly asked. A lead compound X, when heated, produces a brown fumes of a gas Y. What are X and Y? So X is lead nitrate and the brown fumes are of nitrogen dioxide. So this is our Y. This is all thermal decomposition. Next type of decomposition is electrolytic decomposition. When we are passing electricity to decompose a particular reactant. For example, when electricity is passed in water, it breaks up into hydrogen and oxygen. Now, there are many important things to consider in this reaction. First thing is hydrogen, which is liberated, is a gas. Oxygen is also a gas, and they will be collected on different terminals. Hydrogen being positive ion, it will be collected at the negative terminal, that is cathode. And oxygen being negative ion, will be collected at the positive terminal, that is anode. So we need to know when electrolysis of water takes place, which gas is collected at cathode and which gas is collected at anode. Clear? Second important thing that we need to relate is whenever electrolysis of water takes place, then hydrogen and oxygen are actually obtained in the ratio 2 is to 1, because we know in water two hydrogen atoms are combined with one oxygen atom. So that is why when electrolysis is done, they will be obtained in the ratio 2 is to 1. Third important thing, we have just seen that at cathode hydrogen gas is obtained, at anode oxygen is obtained. So if we bring a burning candle near the mouth of anode and cathode, what difference we will observe? At cathode, the gas in it burns rapidly, making a popping sound. Pop sound is little explosion sounds. And we know that it is hydrogen gas which burns with a pop sound. So at cathode, we can relate with the help of this observation that it is hydrogen gas. And at anode, when we bring a burning candle, the candle starts burning brightly. Why? Because it is oxygen being liberated there, and oxygen is a supporter of combustion, we all know. Got it? Another example we need to relate is aluminium oxide. When we pass electricity in molten aluminium oxide, it will break up to form aluminium and oxygen. Once again, both these examples of water and aluminium oxide are examples of decomposition, because the reactant is one, whether it is water or aluminium oxide, and the products are two: hydrogen oxygen in case of water and aluminium oxygen in case of aluminium oxide. Clear? Now the third type of decomposition reactions are photolysis, that is photo decomposition reactions. Photo means light. So these are the decomposition reactions which are taking place in the presence of sunlight. Now in these, we need to remember these two reactions. Silver chloride, it is white in color. When it is exposed to sunlight, it decomposes into silver and chlorine. Chlorine is yellowish green and silver importantly is grayish white. Similarly, when silver bromide AgBr, which is pale yellow in color, when it is kept exposed to sunlight, it also decomposes into silver and bromine. Bromine is reddish brown and silver is grayish white. Now there are many questions that you need to relate here. First thing is, what happens when silver chloride or silver bromide is exposed to sunlight? Second question is, when silver chloride or silver bromide are exposed to sunlight, they are converted into grayish white. Why? Third is, because on keeping in sunlight, they will decompose. That is why both these compounds are always kept in tinted bottles, colored bottles, so that they should be out of the reach of direct sunlight. And one more important thing you need to relate is these silver chloride and silver bromide, they are used in black and white photography. Nowadays, we don't have black and white photography. But in the times of our mothers and fathers' childhood, that time we used to have black and white photography, and there silver chloride and silver bromide were used. So you need to remember it. Got it? So these were all the type of decomposition reactions which were all very important. All of them. Photo decomposition as well as thermal decomposition as well as electrical decomposition. Now one important thing is, when we talk about photo decomposition reactions, we do not take the example of photosynthesis, because photosynthesis agreed that it is taking place in the presence of sunlight, but it is not a decomposition reaction. No decomposition is taking place. So that is why photosynthesis is not an example of photodecomposition or photolysis reaction. Fine. Now let us come to the next type of reactions which are very important. These are the displacement reactions. Now what exactly is meant by displacement reactions? Those reactions in which one element takes the place of another element in a compound. They are known as displacement reactions. Now how come one element can take the place of another? Because one element, if it is more reactive than other element, so it is going to displace the less reactive element from its compound. For example, when zinc is added to copper sulfate solution, now zinc is more reactive than this copper. So what it will do is it will displace copper and form zinc sulfate, and this copper is displaced. Now this is very important reaction, and it is important because of the color changes taking place. You need to remember that copper sulfate is of blue color, right? The brown, it is not, the brown was here actually. This is reddish brown. Let me write it down here. Okay. So copper sulfate is blue solution, zinc is silvery white. This zinc sulfate which is formed is colorless, and copper is reddish brown. The question comes in many ways. What are the products formed when zinc is added to copper sulfate? Or what happens to the blue color of copper sulfate? On adding zinc, the blue color will be converted into colorless. It will fade away. It will decolorize. Why? Because zinc, being more reactive than copper, will displace copper and form zinc sulfate, which is colorless. Got it? Next example, if we add copper magnesium in same copper sulfate solution, now magnesium is also more reactive, so it will displace copper and come in place of copper and form magnesium sulfate. Copper will be produced. Once again, copper sulfate is of blue color, magnesium sulfate is colorless, so again the blue color of copper sulfate will fade away. Next, if we add iron in copper sulfate, once again iron is more reactive than copper. It will displace copper and form iron sulfate. Copper will be given out, and this iron sulfate is greenish solution. We have studied earlier also that iron sulfate is green colored. So the blue color of copper sulfate will turn green on adding iron to it. Clear? Now we have been displacing copper in all the reactions. So let us take such a reaction in which copper has been given the opportunity to displace someone. Let us see in silver nitrate AgNO3 solution, which is a colorless solution, when this reddish brown copper is added, then copper is more reactive than silver. Now this copper will displace silver. Silver is given out, and copper nitrate CuNO3 whole twice is formed, which is of blue color. So the colorless solution of silver nitrate will turn blue on adding copper because of the displacement reaction taking place. Got it? Very important reactions. Color changes are very important. You need to remember the colors of these compounds, whether it is the reactant side or the product side compounds. Okay. Now these were the displacement reactions. Now let's talk about another type of reaction. They are double displacement reactions. Double displacement means now two compounds will be displaced. So those reactions in which two compounds react by an exchange of ions to form two new compounds, they are known as double displacement reactions. For example, silver nitrate AgNO3 when reacts with sodium chloride NaCl, then double displacement takes place. Silver chloride AgCl along with sodium nitrate NaNO3 is formed. So if we try to observe what exactly is happening is initially NO3 nitrate was with Ag and Cl was with sodium, but it has been interchanged. Now Ag is with silver and Na is with NO3 because this Na has taken the place of silver and silver has taken the place of sodium. So this is double displacement taking place. Sodium is displacing silver and silver is displacing sodium. So these kind of reactions are called double displacement reactions. Usually these type of reactions occurs in solutions and one of the products remains insoluble which precipitate out or separates out as a solid. That is why most of the double displacement reactions, there are a few exceptions, so we cannot say all, but usually the double displacement reactions are also precipitation reactions. For example, these reactions, both of them, all of them are quite important. BaCl2, barium chloride, when reacts with Na2SO4, that is sodium sulfate, then double displacement takes place. Barium takes the place of sodium and sodium comes in place of barium. So now it becomes barium sulfate and NaCl, sodium chloride, and this barium sulfate is a white precipitate. So this reaction is an example of double displacement as well as precipitation reaction. Similarly, in the next example, we see CuSO4, which is copper sulfate. When it is reacted with hydrogen sulfide, then copper and hydrogen will displace each other. So in the product, we will get copper sulfide, that is CuS, and H2SO4, that is sulfuric acid. This copper sulfide is a black precipitate. So again, this reaction is also an example of displacement, double displacement as well as precipitation reaction. Another example, AlCl3, this is aluminium chloride, reacts with NH4OH, ammonium hydroxide. Now this aluminium and this ammonium, they will displace each other, and in the product we will now get AlOH whole thrice, this is aluminium hydroxide, and NH4Cl, this is ammonium chloride. This aluminium hydroxide is a white precipitate. Hence, again, this is an example of both double displacement as well as precipitation reactions. This reaction has been asked so many times. Try to relate. PbNO3 whole twice, lead nitrate. When it reacts with Ki, this is potassium iodide, potassium and lead, they will displace each other and we will get lead iodide PbI2, which are yellow precipitate, and KNO3, which is potassium nitrate. You need to remember these lead iodide are yellow precipitate, quite important. So these are all the types of or examples of double displacement reactions. Fine. Now let us come to the next type of reactions. These are the redox reactions. Now what exactly are redox reactions? Redox reactions are actually combination of reduction and oxidation reactions. So, reduction we take RED and oxidation we take OX. So, this combined together forms redox reactions. So, let us try to understand now what are these oxidation and reduction reactions. Now, oxidation and reduction are totally opposite to each other. The addition of oxygen to a substance is called oxidation. If oxygen is getting added to a substance, that is called oxidation. And if the oxygen is removed, the removal of oxygen from a substance is called reduction. So oxidation is addition of oxygen and reduction is removal of oxygen. In terms of oxygen, addition and removal are called oxidation and reduction respectively. Another point to relate the redox reactions or the oxidation reduction reactions is hydrogen. The removal of hydrogen from a substance is also called oxidation, whereas the addition of hydrogen to a substance is called reduction. So again we see they are opposite to each other, right? Third point is losing of an electron by an element is oxidation of that element. If an element is losing electrons, that is the oxidation. But if it is gaining an electron, then it is called reduction, gaining of an electron. Addition of a non-metal to an element is oxidation, whereas addition of a metal to an element is called reduction. So let us try to relate them separately now. If oxygen is getting added or hydrogen is getting removed from a substance, we say that the oxidation of that substance is taking place. If the substance or the element is losing electrons, we say that the oxidation of that substance is taking place. If some non-metal is added to that element, we say that oxidation of that substance is taking place. But if hydrogen is added or oxygen is removed, then we say that the reduction of that element is taking place. Similarly, if the element is gaining electrons or there is an addition of metals to that element, then also we say that reduction is taking place. So these are very important to understand and to remember what exactly is oxidation and what is reduction, right? Another important term that we need to remember is oxidizing agent and reducing agent. The substance which gives oxygen for oxidation, that is called an oxidizing agent. Or in simple words, the substance reduced is called oxidizing agent. And the opposite, that is the substance which removes oxygen, is called a reducing agent. Or in simpler terms, the substance oxidized is called reducing agent. So it is going opposite. You see, substance reduced is the oxidizing agent. Substance oxidized is the reducing agent. Now this is very important because in exam every time you get one question like this in which a reaction is given to us and we have to mention the substance oxidized or the substance reduced or the oxidizing agent or the reducing agent in the reaction. Let us see this particular example. Copper oxide reacts with hydrogen to form copper and water. Now one thing that you need to remember is that oxidation and reduction of any element or substance takes place which are on the reactant side, never in the product side, because after oxidation or after reduction only they get converted into these products. Now try to relate one by one. In the reactant, we saw copper oxide, and in the product, we see only copper. So what does it mean? That this oxygen has been removed from copper oxide, and removal of oxygen is called reduction. So reduction of copper oxide is taking place. Now this oxygen is added to hydrogen, because hydrogen we see in the reactant is H2, but in the product it becomes water, because now oxygen has been added to hydrogen, and addition of oxygen is called oxidation. Therefore oxidation of hydrogen is taking place. Now, very importantly, oxidation and reduction, they always occur together, and that is why we call them redox reactions. So this is an oxidation reaction as well as a reduction reaction. That is why it is termed as redox reactions. Another example, let us see in terms of hydrogen. Now, hydrogen sulfide plus chlorine, when react together, they give sulfur and hydrogen chloride. First of all, try to relate what is there in the reactant and what becomes in the product. So if we try to relate, then hydrogen sulfide is just left to sulfur. That means hydrogen is removed, and removal of hydrogen is called oxidation. So it is the oxidation of hydrogen sulfide that is taking place. And when we talk about chlorine, now in the reactant is what? Chlorine, but in the product it became HCl. So H is added to chlorine, and addition of hydrogen is known as reduction. So therefore reduction of chlorine is taking place. Clear? Let us take one more example. This is quite important example that we are taking. MnO2, manganese dioxide, when reacts with HCl, forms MnCl2, manganese dichloride, and chlorine and water. Now try to relate now. This reactant is MnO2, and if we try to find Mn in the product, we see this is Mn along with Cl2. That means O2 has been removed from MnO2. Oxygen has been removed, and because oxygen is removed, therefore we say that the reduction of manganese dioxide is taking place. And if reduction of manganese dioxide is taking place, obviously HCl, it will be oxidation. But try to relate how. This HCl, we can take it in two terms. Number one, if we take it in the term of Cl, then HCl is reduced to Cl, means hydrogen is removed, and removal of hydrogen is called oxidation. Another way of looking at it is HCl, maybe it is converted into H2O if we try to relate it in the terms of H, hydrogen. So here we see that oxygen has been added to hydrogen, and once again this is called oxidation. Fine. Now this example that I am taking now is a bit different one. Let us try to relate it. In this reaction we see that copper Cu is combining with oxygen O2 to form copper oxide. Now whenever we have done the redox reactions, we have always seen that there were two reactants and two or more than two products. So it was easy for us to relate. Now in this, we have just been given only one product, that is copper oxide. Now how can we find the substance oxidized and substance reduced? Let us try to relate. Now in the reactant, we have got copper. This copper, when we try to relate it with the product, we see that oxygen is added to copper. That means oxidation of copper is taking place. Now you relate oxygen. Reactant side we have got oxygen, which becomes copper oxide in the product. And in oxygen, what exactly is being added? Copper. What is copper? It is a metal. And if you try to relate the fourth point of oxidation and reduction reactions, then addition of metal is called reduction. Let me remind you once again. This is addition of a metal. The fourth point, addition of a metal to an element is called reduction. So you see here we have applied this particular concept, that addition of a metal is called reduction. So in this reaction, oxidation of copper is taking place and reduction of oxygen is taking place. Fine. So these are our redox reactions, and I hope that after taking so many examples, now you have understood what are redox reactions and you will be able to do the questions in which oxidation reduction will be asked. Okay. So let us come to the next topic, that is corrosion. Now, these oxidation reactions that are taking place in our atmosphere, they lead this corrosion. What is corrosion? It is the process in which metals are eaten up gradually by the action of air, moisture, or any chemicals such as acid on their surface. And this is caused mainly due to the oxidation of metals by the oxygen which is present in air. The best example of corrosion that we encounter, every person in our surroundings, we have seen rusting of iron taking place. This is the corrosion of iron, which is termed as rusting of iron. It is the most common form of corrosion. And how does it happen? Whenever an iron object is left in damp air for a considerable time, it gets covered with a red brown flaky substance called rust. And because in this reaction rust is formed, that is why this corrosion of iron is also called rusting of iron. The reaction is very important. Iron Fe reacts with oxygen and moisture in the air. The air should be damp. Only then rusting will take place. If there is only water, no oxygen, no rusting. If only oxygen is there, no water, no rusting. So the two conditions required for rusting are oxygen as well as water. And here we have written X. Why X? Because in different parts of the world we have got different amount of moisture or humidity level in the atmosphere. So X can be many water molecules. Now when they combine with each other, they form Fe2O3 dot XH2O. Once again, this X is basically unknown quantity. It may be 2, 3, 4, 5, as many water of crystallization depending upon the moisture content of that area. And this compound is termed, is written, is said like hydrated iron 3 oxide, or we can say hydrated ferric oxide, because iron 3 is called ferric. And this is what is called rust. Now this rust is a soft and porous substance which gradually falls off from the surface of an iron object. Now once this outer layer falls off, then in that case the iron below that will come in contact with the open damp air, and then the rusting of that down layer that will start to occur, and that is why it will eat away the whole iron object. It is a continuous process, and if not prevented, layer by layer, whole of the iron object will be eaten up by this process of rusting. And that is why, in order to prevent rusting, we paint all the iron articles, because that paint, it actually acts as a layer which does not allow the iron to come in contact with damp air. Similarly, we can prevent rusting by greasing or by oiling, or we can also just have a layer of zinc or tin or chromium over the surface of iron. When we coat iron articles with zinc, we know that that process is called galvanization. Clear? At times we also make alloys of iron along with adding with another metal or non-metal, just to make sure that the corrosion, the rusting does not take place. Okay, so these are the things you need to remember in corrosion, rusting of iron. Fine. The next impact of oxidation is rancidity. Now, what is rancidity? When oil and fat containing food material, the food material which contains oil and fat, if they are kept for a long time in open air, they start giving unpleasant smell and different taste, right? So this phenomena, in which the fat and oil containing food material start giving unpleasant smell and taste when kept in open air, that is called rancidity, and we say that those food items have become rancid, they have become sour, or they have become stale, and this is due to the oxidation. Fine. So the condition produced by aerial oxidation of fat and oil containing food items marked by unpleasant smell and taste is called rancidity. Now this rancidity spoils our food, right? That is why what we do is we try to prevent this rancidity. And how we can do it? We can do it by adding antioxidants to the food items containing fats and oils. These antioxidants are the substances which prevent oxidation. Second way of preventing rancidity is by packing fat and oil containing food in unreactive nitrogen gas. That is why the manufacturers of potato chips and similar food products, whatever come in the packs, they fill these plastic bags containing these chips with nitrogen gas, because it is quite unreactive. It prevents the chips from getting oxidized and turning rancid. We have seen so many times that whenever we are buying a packet of any chips or something like this, we always make sure that it has full gas in it, because if the gas is leaked, then in that case, that means there is some hole, some space through which the nitrogen gas has leaked, and the oxygen must have entered, and the taste of those chips in the packet, it is doubtful whether they are actually crispy or not. Fine. So this is one of the ways in which we can prevent rancidity. Another way of preventing rancidity is by keeping the food in a refrigerator at a low temperature, because at that temperature the oxidation process slows down. Or simply keeping the food items in airtight containers, because the actual purpose is to avoid getting these food items in coming contact with the open air or atmosphere. So this is how we can prevent rancidity, and this is what our chapter is all about: chemical reactions and equations. A small chapter but very important chapter. So you need to relate, you need to learn all the types of chemical reactions, you need to learn the color changes taking place, You need to learn the reactants and the products when they are getting reacted, and quite importantly, all the theoretical concepts. And since the chapter is over now, so what do you expect will be happening in the next class? Obviously, we will be discussing the question answers related to this chapter, which are quite important exam questions. And for that, as always, you must have got bored, na? Just by listening to the same sentence at the end of the class in which we are ending a chapter, that please learn all the topics so that you are able to properly and thoroughly able to do the questions that we are going to discuss in the next class. No, the same old sentences repeated again and again and again, but this is what we always do. We always wake up in the morning and take bath and get fresh and brush and eat and come to school and study and go back home and eat and do our work and entertain and eat and sleep. This is what we daily do. And we can't get bored by sleeping and waking up, eating. No? So this is what exactly same happens with us, the teachers, that we are also in the habit of repeating the things because it is a simple fact which you have to accept and admit that even though one same thing has been told so many times to you, just ask one question within yourself: have you actually obeyed it every time? Have you always, in all the chapters, you have learned side by side? No. And that is the reason we try to say it so many times, because we don't know when you will realize. And from that time onwards, you became sincere, because that is when you will get the actual benefit of these classes. Otherwise, how well I have taught doesn't matter. How well you have understood doesn't matter, because after 15 days, if you have not learned these, if you have not revised these, it will all be vanished. So, what was the use of me teaching you so nicely, or you understanding so nicely? It's all getting wasted. Okay, so next session I'll be taking up the question answers from this chapter. Come prepared and give me the answers before I give you the answers. Okay, so till then, take care of yourself. Have a good time. Thank you so much for being with me. Have a good time again. Goodbye.